Trump's America, the shocking comeback that changed everything.
Wow. So, Trump, huh? I mean, can you believe it? He pulled it off again.
Yeah, it's definitely a head spinner.
I think a lot of us are still kind of reeling from this 2024 election, to be honest. It's like nobody really saw this coming.
It's a real curveball, that's for sure.
It really makes you wonder, like, what does this mean for America going forward? That's kind of what we're going to try to get into today.
Absolutely, yeah.
We're going to be taking a look at this really thought-provoking article from the New York Times.
Yeah, I read that one.
It's called Trump's America. Comeback victory signals a different kind of country.
It's quite a deep dive.
Yeah, and I'm hoping with your help we can kind of break it down, extract some of those key insights.
Sounds good to me.
Okay, so right off the bat, this article really hits you with the force of this victory, right?
Mm-hmm.
They use this phrase, red current, to describe this massive wave of support that Trump had.
Yeah, like a tsunami almost.
And it wasn't just those nail-biter races everyone was glued to.
Nope, it went way beyond that. It's like the polls, the pundits, all the usual suspects, they were looking at the wrong map. This red current completely blew past the battleground states everyone was so focused on.
It really does make you think maybe we were all a little out of touch with what was actually happening in some parts of the country.
Could be. But, it's not like this was just dumb luck for Trump. The authors make a pretty big statement. They say this win actually puts him in the history books.
Yeah, like a major defining figure in American history.
Exactly. And they have a point, Think about it. 2 wins, not even back-to-back, 8 years apart.
Yeah, it's unheard of.
That's not just a comeback story. That's rewriting history.
And it tells us something, right? We can't just dismiss this as some weird fluke.
Exactly. There's something deeper going on here.
So then the big question becomes, what is driving this? The article talks about something they call populist disenchantment. Basically, this feeling of being really frustrated with where the country is headed.
And not just frustrated, right? Like, there's a real anger there, a resentment toward the people in charge, the elites, whatever you want to call them.
Right, like a whole chunk of America feels like they're being ignored, left behind.
Economically, culturally, the whole 9 yards.
Hey, so how did all that disenchantment, translate into votes for Trump? The article highlights a few things.
Well, one of the biggies they point to is economic anxiety. A lot of folks out there are struggling. They feel like the system is rigged against them.
And they see Trump as someone who at least gets it, right? Even if it's just talk.
Yeah, exactly. He speaks their language in a way that a lot of politicians don't.
It's interesting, though, because the article also points out that Trump's appeal goes way beyond just his policies.
Totally. It's like his whole style, the way he carries himself, even his flaws somehow work in his favor.
Yeah. It's kind of paradoxical, isn't it?
Totally. He's brash, unconventional, breaks all the rules. But for the people who feel like the system has failed them,
it's almost like that's what they like about him.
Yeah, it's like they're saying, you know what, we're so fed up, we're willing to roll the dice on anyone who shakes things up.
And it's not just like a handful of fringe voters either.
No.
We're talking about a guy who was actually convicted of a crime, right? And people still voted for him.
It's wild. It really shows you how deep this dissatisfaction runs.
No kidding.
Yeah.
The article even uses this phrase, Trump's America. It's almost a whole different country,
Yeah, it's a powerful phrase, and it gets to the heart of what's happening. They even quote historians who are wrestling with this idea. What does it mean that America reelected someone who not only tried to overturn the last election, but even said we should get rid of the Constitution altogether?
I mean, that's heavy stuff, right? If this really is Trump's America, where do we even go from here?
Yes, the million-dollar question. That's a tough one. And to really wrap our heads around it, we got to zoom out a bit. The article, it kind of hints that this might not be totally unprecedented in American history.
Oh, really? What do you mean?
Well, they point out that America's had these moments before, right? When things feel really shaky, uncertainty's in the air.
That's okay.
There's this tendency almost to, gravitate towards strongman figures.
Yeah.
Leaders who promise to turn everything upside down.
Yeah.
Even if they got to bend the rules a little.
Yeah.
Or, break them.
Yeah, that's a little unsettling when you put it that way. But I see what you mean. So, okay, we've talked a lot about Trump, but this article doesn't just focus on him, right?
Right.
They spend a good chunk of it looking at the Biden-Harris administration, what they could have done differently, all that.
They definitely don't let the incumbents off easy. The authors, they argued that even though Biden and Harris got some big stuff passed, they really fumbled the ball on some key issues. Issues that were like driving that voter discontent.
Right, inflation, right. That was a big one on the campaign trail.
Big time.
Yeah.
And then there's immigration, another hot potato that they just couldn't quite handle. The article's point is these failures, or perceived failures, they basically played right into Trump's hands.
Gave him all the ammo he needed.
Totally. He could point to that frustration and be like, hey, I'm the only one who could fix this mess.
So what about their whole unity message? Biden and Harris, they really pushed that whole bringing the country together, healing the divides. Did that just not resonate with people?
Well, the article kind of suggests that, those efforts, they might have missed the mark, at least for a lot of voters.
You weren't buying it.
Yeah, like they couldn't really counter Trump's whole, us versus them thing, convince enough people that they had a better way.
And this election, it brings up another big, complicated thing, one that the article digs into as well, the gender thing.
Yeah.
Did the fact that Trump, a man accused of, all that stuff by multiple women, did the fact that he beat a female candidate say something about us, about where we are as a society?
It's a tough question to ask, for sure, an uncomfortable one. But, we can't just ignore it. The authors, they point out that Trump's whole campaign, his style, his message, it was very deliberately aimed at men. And he won, despite everything. So, yeah, I think it does raise some really hard questions about bias, about how much progress we've really made.
Yeah, it's definitely something we got to think about, as a country, And then there's the elephant in the room.
Yeah.
January 6th. The article makes this really chilling point about how Trump winning actually changes the way we see that whole attack on the Capitol.
Right. It's like it's being rewritten as this prelude to his comeback, a sign that his supporters were, right to be angry. And that's terrifying. It makes political violence seem normal.
Almost like it's a legitimate way to get what you want politically.
Exactly. That's the scary part. So do they think he'll be even more, emboldened in this second term? Could he try to, grab even more power?
Yeah, is he going to go even further this time?
That's what they're suggesting.
Oh, yeah.
He's going to feel justified, validated by this win. And that might mean fewer limits on what he's willing to do, even if it means, going after his opponents or weakening those democratic checks and balances.
Man, that's a pretty bleak outlook on the next 4 years.
It's not a rosy picture, that's for sure. They basically warn about a chaotic, unpredictable second term, with Trump potentially, acting on some of his worst impulses.
Something to think about.
It is. So we've covered a lot, but I keep coming back to that phrase, Trump's America.
Yeah.
What did they really mean by that? What does it tell us about where we are as a country?
It's definitely a loaded phrase, right? On the one hand, it's acknowledging that a big chunk of America, they connect with Trump. They see him as their guy fighting for them.
Right.
On the other hand, though, it makes you worry about what that means for everyone else, the people who don't feel that way about him.
It feels like we're standing on the edge of something, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
This election, it just unearthed so much.
A lot of stuff bubbling under the surface.
Yeah, and it's easy to just feel overwhelmed by it all, for sure. It's a lot to process, no doubt. But, the one thing we can't do is bury our heads in the sand. These authors, they make it clear. This isn't just another election. This is a
turning point.
Yeah, a defining moment for America. And, we're not just watching it happen. We're all part of it. What happens next, it's on all of us.
So where do we even start? We've talked about all these factors that got us here, what could happen next, but what can we actually do?
Well, first things first, right? Awareness. This conversation we're having, it's just scratching the surface.
Right.
Read the whole article, dig into other sources, and most importantly, be willing to look at your own assumptions.
Yeah, don't just stay in your own little bubble,
Yeah.
Talk to people who see things differently. Try to understand where they're coming from. It's not about agreeing with everyone, but
it's about those tough conversations,
right.
Trying to bridge the gap.
Exactly. And then get involved. Support groups that are fighting for those, democratic ideals. Contact your representatives, make your voice heard.
Make it count.
This isn't a spectator sport, right? We're all in this thing. Democracy, it only works if we all participate. The future, it really is in our hands.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And, as you keep thinking about this election, what it all means, Think about what really struck you today. What resonated? What questions are you still wrestling with?
Those are the questions we all need to be asking, right? Because, if this really is Trump's America, like they say,
Yeah. Mm.
then we got to figure out what that means for ourselves, for the future of this country. And I mean, that's worth thinking about, isn't it?
Absolutely.